What if your spiritual light were fading at this very moment and you didn't even notice? Let that question move through you like an ancient wind echoing inside a silent cavern. Sometimes it's not the crash that signals the end of a light. It's the quiet, a quiet so gentle, so discreet, that you only recognize it once you've already wandered too far from yourself. Something within you may have been whispering for years, and you've ignored it. Or maybe you simply forgot how to listen. We live in a time when everything screams. The city screams, responsibilities scream, expectations scream. Even our thoughts, those restless little travelers, seem to shout inside our heads, fighting for space like frantic birds trapped in a small cage. But the soul never screams. The soul whispers. And that's why so many people live far from themselves. The world teaches us to hear noise, but never teaches us to hear subtlety. The inner light, that mystery found across cultures, eras, and spiritual traditions, has always been a universal symbol. Ancient people described it as a flame, a spark, a sacred fire. Philosophers called it consciousness. Eastern sages compared it to the breath that sustains life. And Jesus Christ, with a depth that transcends centuries, said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness." These words are not just a spiritual invitation. They're a reminder that there is a light that doesn't come from the eyes, but from the spirit. As you listen now, try to observe yourself from a distance. How is your light? Is it steady? Is it trembling? Is it hidden under the weight of worry? Breathe slowly and notice. Because here is a profound truth. The inner light never fades all at once. It dims gradually, almost imperceptibly, like the sun slipping behind the mountains without warning. And here comes the question almost no one asks in time. What is the real risk that almost everyone overlooks until it's too late? It's not the dimming of the light itself. We all feel our soul waver at times. The real danger is failing to notice the process. It's getting used to the shadows. It's living so fast that there's no space left to notice what's dying inside. Throughout this video, I will guide you through deep spiritual insights and practical understandings, revealing not only how the light is lost, but how to regain it, strengthen it, and protect it. This isn't content to consume in a hurry. It's an inner journey, a path that asks for sincerity, presence, and courage. So, breathe. Open your heart. Because now we begin exploring the moment where everything changes, the silent beginning of spiritual decline. Spiritual light, few can define it, but everyone knows how it feels. It's not an abstract idea nor a distant concept. It's consciousness vibrating, the essence that connects us to the divine, the quiet point within us where everything is clear even when the world is in chaos. When we speak of inner light, we speak of a subtle alignment between who we are and the one who created us. We speak of the living reminder that something greater exists, something that guides, inspires, protects, and awakens. But that light doesn't go out at once. It is lost slowly, like a flame that flickers when the wind shifts. Modern life, fast, urgent, relentless, pushes us into a superficial wakefulness where we are awake, but not awakened. And this is where the process begins. Silent, gradual, invisible to eyes that aren't paying attention. The Stoics taught that true freedom lies in inner vigilance. They understood that the world can swirl with chaos, but no one can steal the soul's clarity except ourselves when we stop paying attention. And Jesus Christ reinforces this call with eternal depth. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. This watch isn't about fear. It's about wakefulness. It's about noticing when the soul begins to cool. It's about catching the first signs before the shadows spread. So what are those signs? What weakens spiritual light so quietly? The first cause is chronic spiritual neglect. It's living like someone who looks around but doesn't truly see. Days repeat, emotions pile up, annoyances become normal, and you no longer ask, "How am I on the inside?" Neglect is forgetting yourself. It's the soul knocking, and you answering, "I'll deal with it later." But you never do. It's losing the habits of introspection, pause, prayer, presence. The light weakens because no one feeds it. The second cause is excessive attachment to past wounds. Here, the light doesn't just weaken, it gets covered. Accumulated hurt is like dust on a lamp. The bulb is still there, but the glow no longer shines through. Clinging to pain is carrying old shadows as if they were part of your identity. Many think healing means forgetting, but healing means transforming. It means looking at the past and saying, "This hurt me, but it doesn't define me." The problem begins when a person silently repeats, "I am my pain." In that moment, the light loses space inside. The third cause is constant mental noise, that whirlwind of thoughts that never rests. A noisy mind is a house too full. There's no room for the soul to speak. And when the soul tries to speak, its voice gets lost among worries, fears, and imagined catastrophes. Mental noise creates an inner fog. The person feels tired and doesn't know why, restless but can't find the source, disconnected but assumes it's normal. And without realizing, the light drifts further into the background, still there but distant, like a forgotten candle in a room no one visits anymore. These three causes, neglect, attachment, and noise, don't extinguish the light at once. They weaken it slowly, like a flame that trembles, first small, then unstable, then almost invisible. Imagine a candle in an old house. It doesn't go out with a single gust. It's the drafts, the neglect, the passing time. And when you finally notice, the room is too dim to reveal itself. And that's when something deeper occurs. The person enters spiritual autopilot. They live on automatic, repeat routines, fulfill obligations, do what must be done, but no longer feel, no longer find meaning, no longer experience presence. Life becomes a sequence of tasks, and the sacred hides behind the ordinary. When inner consciousness falls asleep, emotional shadows rise, not to harm, but to warn. Resentment, exhaustion, discouragement, self-destructive beliefs, these aren't weaknesses, they're signals. They're alarms from the soul saying, the light is fading. But many interpret this incorrectly. They confuse strength with hardening. They believe being strong means enduring everything silently, never showing emotion, pushing through without feeling. But hardening is not maturing. Hardening is locking internal doors, building walls where windows should be, trapping the light in a space too small. And so, ironically, in trying to protect themselves, they move even further from their own light. Yet the greatest danger still hasn't appeared. Everything described so far is only the beginning. It's the surface. What comes next is deeper, subtler, and far more dangerous, because the real risk isn't a flickering flame. The real risk is the moment a person starts believing it's normal to walk in the dark, and this revelation, intense and uncomfortable, will be the core of the next topic. Prepare yourself. What happens when someone becomes accustomed to their own darkness can reshape entire destinies. The real danger doesn't begin when the light weakens, but when someone starts calling the darkness normal. This is the truth few are willing to confront, and it completely transforms our understanding of spiritual life. Because darkness, when it first appears, startles. But when it remains, it becomes familiar. And that's when danger silently settles in. Imagine stepping into a room without light. At first, the darkness shocks you. It's strange, uncomfortable. But after a few minutes, your eyes adjust. What once felt impossible becomes tolerable. The initial discomfort fades, replaced by a false sense of adaptation, and this is the process that destroys souls, not darkness itself, but growing accustomed to it. Spiritually, psychologically, and philosophically, this phenomenon is well known. Human beings can adapt to anything, even what harms them. And when the inner light fades, the heart doesn't shut down instantly. It recalibrates. It tries to function with less clarity, less truth, less awareness. Slowly, the person normalizes what never should have been normal. Lack of purpose, exhaustion, emotional numbness, loss of direction. Darkness becomes routine, and routine darkness is the most dangerous kind. There are unmistakable signs that someone has begun falling asleep spiritually, though the person rarely sees them. The first sign is emotional numbness. They don't feel like they used to. What once moved them now feels distant. Beauty no longer touches them. Profound words fall flat. Simple gestures don't inspire. It's not that they've lost emotion, it's that the emotions are muffled. The soul speaks, but the mind doesn't listen. The second sign is forgetting one's purpose. Life becomes driven by mechanical obligations. Work, accomplish, fix, repeat. The person does what they must, but no longer knows why. Choices become automatic. Existence becomes a path walked without map, direction, or desire. It's living without truly living. The third sign is quickly replacing pain with distraction. When the soul tries to signal, the person rushes to fill the emptiness with anything. More work, more content, more noise, more stimulation, anything to avoid silence. But the more they run, the weaker the light becomes. There are also subtle signs: constant irritation, inner heaviness, loss of hope, difficulty imagining a bright future, and still the person tells themselves, "I'm fine, it's just a phase." But it's not. It's adaptation to darkness. Jesus Christ warned of this danger with words as sharp as truth itself. If the light within you becomes darkness, how great is that darkness? This is not judgment, it's caution. It reveals that when inner light becomes clouded, a person might believe they're okay, while being miles away from themselves. This is where spiritual self-abandonment begins, when someone stops listening to themselves, stops caring for their soul, stops seeking what uplifts them, and without noticing, begins accepting far less than they deserve. They accept emotional crumbs, spiritual crumbs, crumbs of life. They settle for little, not because they're humble, but because they're disconnected. Here the metaphor of the dark house deepens. Spend long enough in a room without light, and your eyes adjust, but you never truly see. You only adapt, and the same happens within the spirit. A person begins to confuse survival with a full life, begins to think it's normal to wake up exhausted every day, begins accepting empty relationships, begins believing inner emptiness is part of adulthood. And all this forms a cycle of spiritual numbness few escape without a strong inner awakening. But how does someone reach this point? The journey is slow, almost invisible. First come the small signs of disconnection, emotional fatigue, lack of inspiration, absence of inner silence. Then the soul tries to warn with a faint discomfort, a sense that something is off, but the person distracts themselves, postpones, ignores. Then the inner emptiness arrives, that subtle lack of meaning, like something has been missing for a long time. But again, instead of listening, the person tries to fill the void with quick stimulation. Distraction becomes escape. Escape becomes habit. Habit becomes spiritual anesthesia. And it is precisely when someone stops resisting the darkness that the real danger begins, because they don't realize they're fading. They think they're just adjusting. But in truth, they are losing spiritual sensitivity. And when sensitivity goes, the light follows. This process creates such deep inner fog that even major life decisions lose clarity. Purpose shatters, relationships lose depth, the ability to love sincerely weakens. The person begins to live in a half-conscious state where everything feels grey, dull, directionless. They smile, but don't feel. They speak, but don't express. They live, but don't awaken. And perhaps the most important question of this entire video is, have you, without realizing, begun adapting to the darkness? Don't blame yourself if the answer is maybe. Every soul loses itself at some point. Every light faces nights. Every flame flickers. The purpose here isn't judgment, it's awakening. And that's why, in the next topic, we will enter a story, a deep, emotional, symbolic story. A story that works like a mirror, not to expose weakness, but to reveal truth. The story of someone who almost lost their light completely and who found in the darkness an unexpected path home. Prepare yourself. What you're about to hear may very well be a subtle version of your own journey. He was an ordinary person. Someone who, on the outside, seemed to have built a calm, stable, even beautiful life. There were days when his heart felt like a field lit by sunrise. Everything had color, everything had meaning. He believed in goodness, believed in the sacred, believed there was something inside him that shone in a unique way. He lived lightly, sought what was true, felt grateful for small things. But slowly, almost without noticing, something began to change. It didn't happen suddenly. His light didn't go out like a door slamming shut. It dimmed like a late sunset sinking behind distant hills. First came small signs. Lack of enthusiasm upon waking, the sense that everything felt heavier, emotional fatigue that wasn't of the body but of the soul. He ignored it, thought it was just a phase, and kept going. Then he began losing the brightness in his eyes. Conversations that once inspired him now felt empty. The things that once moved him no longer stirred anything inside. He got used to living on autopilot, assuming that's what adults do: endure, carry, resist. But without realizing, he was letting something sacred slip away. His days grew longer, quieter, stranger. His inner light weakened like a forgotten candle. And like many of us, he assumed this was normal. After all, everyone gets tired, everyone feels pressure, everyone carries shadows. He just didn't notice his were growing too large. Until the emptiness accelerated, he felt surrounded by an invisible fog that blurred colors, emotions, dreams. He no longer knew what he wanted. He couldn't find rest, even in silence. Everything felt distant, as if he were living from deep inside himself without access to his own heart. And then came the breaking point. It was an ordinary night, no different from the others. He sat alone, staring at a wall, unable to explain why he felt so lost. The silence was heavy. The house felt dark even with the lights on. And suddenly the truth hit him like a painful revelation. He had grown accustomed to the darkness. He had stopped feeling, stopped seeking, stopped watching over his own soul. He had let his light fade to almost nothing. In that moment, something inside him broke open. It was as if his soul, tired of waiting, finally cried out. Not loudly, but urgently. A quiet plea for help he could no longer ignore. He placed his hands over his face and realized he couldn't remember the last time he had cried. And right there, in the middle of that emptiness, he felt deep pain, but also unexpected clarity. A memory surfaced, simple yet powerful. The words of Jesus Christ he had heard countless times as a child. "I am the light of the world." And somehow, that memory struck a spark, a thought, a whisper, a recollection. It doesn't matter. Something lit up. Small, fragile, but real. He took a deep breath. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt he wasn't alone, that the light hadn't been lost. only forgotten. And he finally allowed himself to do something he had avoided for too long, look within without fear. He understood then that the light doesn't return by accident. It returns when we choose to return to ourselves. It returns when the soul says, "Enough," and the consciousness finally listens. It returns when someone chooses to walk toward truth, trembling, exhausted, uncertain, but willing. His awakening wasn't an external miracle, it was an internal decision. He realized that rekindling his inner light required courage, sincerity, presence. And though he was still surrounded by darkness, he knew the flame had awakened again. And maybe, just like him, many of us are only one honest moment away from finding our light again. All it takes is the courage to turn inward. The story you just heard isn't only about one person. It's a living metaphor for the silent journey many people go through. Every element, the fading light, the ignored signs, the growing emptiness, the breaking point, the returning spark, represents deep processes within the human soul. The narrative is symbolic because it speaks of something universal, the invisible struggle between an awakening consciousness and the darkness that tries to convince us that nothing is worth feeling anymore. When the character began losing his light, he didn't notice right away. He adapted, just as we saw earlier that so many do. Neglect, attachment to old wounds, constant mental noise. These elements filled his inner space until clarity vanished. The story mirrors these mechanisms. It shows what happens when someone stops watching over their soul, confuses strength with hardening, mistakes survival for real living. But the most important point is this: spiritual responsibility. No one rekindles our light for us. Not even God does it without our inner yes. Divine light is always available, but we must choose it. We must clear space, release what burdens us, quiet the mind, acknowledge what is dying within. The character only rediscovered his spark when he finally faced his own shadow, with humility, honesty, and courage. Jesus Christ always taught about new beginnings, about light, about the importance of guarding the heart. His message is not one of fear, but of awakening. He shows that there is always a path back, always a way home, always a chance to step into clarity for those who choose truth. And now, with the story still vivid in your mind, the essential question emerges: did you recognize yourself in it? There are three fundamental principles that protect and rekindle spiritual light. They are not complicated, they don't require perfection, and they don't depend on special conditions. They are simple, yet profoundly transformative. These principles appear across ancient traditions, philosophy, and most importantly, in the teachings of Jesus Christ. The first principle is presence, becoming aware of your inner state. Presence is more than being here. It is perceiving, noticing, feeling the silent movement of your own soul. It is pausing in the middle of chaos to ask, "How am I inside?" When you cultivate presence, you recognize the dimming of your light before it becomes darkness. You notice your heart before it hardens. You sense sadness before it becomes shadow. Jesus taught presence when he said, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." He spoke of deep listening, the listening of the soul. Practicing presence is like lighting a small lamp within. It is the first step toward preventing silent spiritual decline. The second principle is purification, releasing what drains the soul. Purifying doesn't mean erasing the past. It means freeing yourself from it. It is letting old wounds stop taking the place where light should shine. It is cleaning resentment, loosening expectations, forgiving yourself, breaking cycles that no longer support life. Purification is like cleaning the glass of a window. The light was always on the other side, but it only enters when the build-up is removed. Jesus taught purification when he said the pure in heart would see God, not a purity of perfection, but of honesty, truth, and openness. When the soul is purified, it breathes again. and the light breathes with it. The third principle is rekindling, simple daily practices that strengthen the light. Spiritual light, like a flame, needs nourishment. Rekindling is cultivating what uplifts: prayer, silence, gratitude, spiritual reflection, contemplation, small acts of kindness, inner rest. The light does not return through grand events, but through consistency. The soul flourishes when cared for daily, not only in moments of crisis. Jesus showed this by withdrawing into quiet places to pray, tending to his own inner light before continuing his mission. Rekindling is nourishing the flame that belongs to you. It is remembering every day that you are a living temple. These three principles, presence, purification, and rekindling, form a sacred circle. One protects the other, one strengthens the other. Live them consistently, and the inner light not only returns, it becomes steadier, brighter, truer. And though they seem simple, these principles can completely reshape a person's spiritual destiny. Because it's not enough to avoid darkness. You must choose light every day. Spiritual light is a gift, but also a responsibility. It is born in us as divine breath, a silent truth that has been with us since the beginning. But it also depends on our care, our vigilance, our daily choice to remain awake. Light doesn't disappear without warning. It sends signals, asks for attention, seeks space, and when we forget to listen, it withdraws, waiting for the moment we find the courage to return inward. And maybe the most important question of this entire video isn't whether your light is fading. Maybe the real question is, are you aware enough to notice? Because those who guard their light never lose themselves completely. Those who listen to the heart before it falls silent find paths the eyes cannot see. And those who choose sincerely to walk toward inner truth always find invisible hands guiding them. The real danger, the one so few recognize, isn't the weakening of the light. It's the normalization of darkness. It's the moment when someone becomes too exhausted to fight and begins believing that a joyless life is normal, that emotional numbness is adulthood, that inner heaviness is permanent. But it isn't. The soul was created to shine, to perceive the sacred, to walk in clarity, not in shadow. Jesus Christ is the ultimate guide of light. His words don't just illuminate, they awaken. He reminds us that there is a path, a direction, a life that begins when we allow the divine light to dwell within. He doesn't speak of a distant light, but a light already inside us, waiting for us to turn toward it with humility, presence, and faith. And now, as you breathe deeply and let these words settle within you, ask yourself, what within me needs to be rekindled? What within me needs purification? What within me is asking for presence? Every person who hears this carries a unique light, and no flame is too small to transform an entire destiny. Your light may have dimmed, but it never ceased to exist. It is here, waiting for your yes, waiting for your choice, waiting for the moment you decide to return to what is true. And when you do, even slowly, even trembling, even silently, the light responds. Because light always responds to those who seek it sincerely. May this message be not just a reflection, but a spiritual invitation. Share it, reflect on it, return to it whenever you need. This journey doesn't end here. It begins now. May your light shine. May your awareness awaken. May your soul find rest.